The Duke tore the letter from his wife's hand and dropped it into the brazier. Your affair ends tonight. Duchess Elinor Blackmere watched the folded paper buckle in the flames. The ink darkened first, then the signature disappeared beneath a curl of orange fire. Captain Julian Harrow. A name she had not spoken aloud in 11 years. Conversation died beneath the painted ceiling of Blackmere's great hall. Nearly 70 guests had gathered for the banquet preceding the royal autumn hunt. Noblemen stood beside abandoned glasses. Ladies turned openly in their chairs. Even the musicians had lowered their bows. Elinor felt every gaze settle upon her. "Nathaniel," she said, keeping her voice level, "you have just destroyed evidence." "I have destroyed obscenity." Duke Nathaniel Blackmere reached toward the table beside him. Sir Corwin Vale, his recently appointed master of the hunt, placed a bundle of letters into his hand. They were tied with blue ribbon, the same shade Elinor used for messages carried through Blackmere's signal network. Nathaniel raised them before the room. "These were discovered beneath the floor of my wife's private office." They arranged secret meetings with Captain Harrow and described the movements of men attached to the crown. A murmur spread among the guests. Elinor did not look at their faces. She studied the ribbon. It had been tied in a sailor's knot. Her keepers used a double loop that could be released with one gloved hand. Nathaniel had watched her demonstrate it when they established the first pigeon loft 9 years earlier. "Who found them?" she asked. "I did," Corwin answered. He wore Blackmere's scarlet hunting coat, although he had received his promotion only 3 weeks before. He had served Nathaniel for nearly 2 years, first by negotiating access to neighboring hunting grounds, and later by helping secure the royal visit that Nathaniel believed would restore his influence at court. "You entered my private office?" Elinor asked. "On the Duke's authority." She turned to her husband. "You gave him permission before speaking to me." Nathaniel's expression remained rigid. "3 letters are in your handwriting. They imitate my handwriting. One describes the route His Majesty's party will take through the northern woods. That route has been discussed by every officer involved in the hunt. And one instructs Captain Harrow to meet you at the old watchtower. I have not seen Julian Harrow since before our marriage." Nathaniel opened another letter. "When the royal party crosses Blackmere Bridge, the eastern bank will be unguarded. Send your answer by the Grey Hen, as before." Several guests reacted at once. Elinor extended her hand. "Let me examine it." "You have had ample opportunity to examine your own lies." The cruelty was deliberate. That wounded her more than the accusation. For 9 years, Elinor had overseen Blackmere's emergency communication system. Homing pigeons stationed at the riverside villages carried requests for physicians, warnings of rising water, and reports from isolated farms back to the estate. From Blackmere, riders and signal towers carried the response outward. The system had saved lives during 2 severe floods. Nathaniel had once praised it before the county magistrates. Tonight he had decided it was evidence of adultery. "The paper," Elinor said. "Hold it toward the light." Corwin gave a quiet laugh. "Will candlelight make the words less treasonous?" "It may reveal the watermark. My correspondence paper comes from Bell & Sons in York. Their mark is a bell beneath a crown." Nathaniel hesitated. For one brief moment Elinor believed he would look. Corwin leaned closer to him. "With respect, Your Grace, she is delaying us. Every minute allows her keepers to remove records from the loft." Nathaniel folded the letter without testing it. That was the choice Elinor would remember. Not his anger, but the instant doubt entered his face, and pride drove it out again. He placed the bundle upon the table. "From this moment, you are forbidden to use the Blackmere seal. Your keepers will surrender their keys and submit to questioning. Sir Corwin will assume control of the pigeon lofts, the signal room, and every dispatch record." Elinor's composure cracked. "You cannot give him control of that network. I have already done so. The lower bridge collapsed last week. 3 villages beyond the Y can reach us quickly only by releasing their birds. If the river rises, this is not about villagers. That is precisely why you are unfit to decide it." The words struck the hall like a slap. Nathaniel descended from the dais until only a few feet separated them. A pulse beat sharply beside his temple. "You will apologize." "No." Elinor, you are dismantling an emergency network 2 days before the royal party enters Blackmere Forest. You are doing it because a man you promoted 3 weeks ago found letters you refused to examine. I have trusted Corwin for 2 years. You trust what he promises you. Nathaniel's gaze hardened. Take her to her rooms. 2 footmen approached, neither willing to touch her. Elinor lifted her chin. If you silence me tonight, the responsibility for what follows will be yours. Do not threaten me in my own house. It was a warning. To me, there appears to be no difference. A crash sounded beyond the tall windows. Then came shouting from the eastern courtyard. Elinor moved first. She crossed the hall and pushed through the terrace doors. Cold air swept against her smoke-warmed cheeks. Below, Corwin's men were removing cages from the pigeon loft, while servants carried dispatch boxes toward the signal room. One guard struck a wooden rack with the butt of his musket. "Stop!" Elinor shouted. The rack split. Frightened pigeons beat against the wire, scattering feathers across the courtyard. Nathaniel emerged behind her. The birds are being transferred to the lower stable. They cannot simply be crowded together. Each loft contains birds trained to return to a specific location. Mix them now, and you destroy the record of where every bird belongs. Sir Corwin assured me they would remain useful. Sir Corwin does not understand how they work. Corwin appeared in the doorway. I understand enough to prevent them from carrying messages to your former lover. They do not fly wherever I command. They return to the lofts where they were raised. That is why the line in your letter is wrong. Silence spread across the terrace. Nathaniel looked at her. What line? Send your answer by the Grey Hen. A bird released at Blackmere cannot carry an answer from here to Captain Harrow. It would circle and return to Blackmere unless it belonged to his loft. Corwin's expression barely changed. The wording may be imprecise. Then whoever wrote it did not understand the system they accused me of abusing. Nathaniel glanced toward the surviving letters. Elinor saw doubt again, stronger this time. Before he could speak, wings struck the darkness above them. A gray pigeon descended unevenly over the courtyard. One wing faltered. The bird struck the fountain rim, recovered and fell among the wet stones. Elinor hurried down the steps. She recognized the silver band around its leg. 19, she whispered. The bird belonged to the northern watchtower. Thomas Reed, one of her senior keepers, had taken it there 3 days earlier. Thomas had not returned. Corwin claimed he had fled after helping Elinor conceal the letters. Blood darkened the pigeon's breast, but Elinor found no wound beneath the feathers. The blood belonged to someone else. A narrow message tube remained fastened to its leg. Nathaniel reached for it. Elinor drew the bird against her chest. You have already burned one message. His hand stopped. She opened the tube herself. Inside lay a torn strip of cartridge paper marked with the black stag used by Nathaniel's private hunting guard. Around it was wrapped a scrap of scarlet wool and a note in Thomas Reed's handwriting. Only one sentence remained legible. The route was changed after the Duke approved it. Do not trust the men in scarlet. Every person in the courtyard looked toward Corwin's officers. Corwin stepped forward. A wounded servant could have written that under coercion. Then we should find him, Elinor replied. Before Nathaniel could issue an order, glass shattered above the courtyard. Flames rose behind the windows of the signal room, where the return ledgers recorded the home loft, numbered band, and journey of every bird in Elinor's network. A servant ran toward the entrance. The door is locked. From inside came a young man's scream. Elinor thrust the pigeon into the hands of a groom and raced toward the burning building. As Corwin's guards followed, she saw one of them slip a brass key into his coat, and Corwin saw her notice. Elinor reached the signal room door and seized the iron handle. It would not turn. Inside, fire climbed the shelves where the return ledgers were kept. Pigeons battered against the wire partitions above the adjoining loft. Beneath the crack of burning timber came another scream. "Samuel!" Elinor shouted. A young keeper answered through the smoke. "Your Grace, help me." Nathaniel arrived with 2 stable hands. "Break the door." They drove their shoulders against it, but the heavy oak barely moved. Elinor pointed at the guard whose hand had slipped into his coat. "You have the key." The man stepped back. "I was ordered to secure the room." By whom? His eyes moved toward Corwin. Corwin descended the courtyard steps. I ordered the records protected after the warning arrived. Protected? Elinor demanded. You locked a boy inside a burning room. The fire must have started afterward. Nathaniel held out his hand. The key. The guard surrendered it. Nathaniel forced it into the lock, but the door opened only an inch before striking something solid. Barred from within, Corwin said. Elinor crouched beside the threshold. A strip of iron had been driven beneath the lower hinge, forcing the door against its frame. No, wedged from outside. Nathaniel looked sharply at the guard. I know nothing about that, Your Grace. Samuel cried out again, weaker than before. Elinor turned toward a side window above the water trough. It was narrow, but wide enough if the glass were broken. She seized a wooden bench and dragged it beneath the sill. Nathaniel caught her arm. You are not going inside. Then tell me which of your men knows the layout. The roof may fall, and Samuel may die while you discuss it. Elinor wrapped a wet horse blanket around her shoulders. Nathaniel tightened his grip. Elinor, you destroyed the first piece of evidence. I will not stand here while the rest burns. She pulled free, climbed onto the bench and struck the window with a bucket. Glass shattered inward. Smoke rolled over her as she cleared the jagged pieces with the blanket and climbed through. Heat closed around her. The signal room had become a tunnel of black smoke. Flames consumed the shelves holding route maps, keeper rosters, and dispatch records. Someone had piled straw beneath them and soaked it with lamp oil. This was no accident. Elinor dropped to the floor and crawled toward Samuel's coughing. She found him pinned beneath a fallen cabinet beside the loft partitions. Blood ran from his temple. Can you move your legs? My right one. She tried to lift the cabinet. It barely shifted. Samuel caught her burned hand. He took the return ledger. Who? A man in a scarlet coat. Samuel struggled for breath. He knew which book to take. Did you see his face? Samuel's frightened gaze moved toward the broken window. No, but he used the signal room key. The main door crashed inward. Nathaniel emerged through the smoke with two stable hands. He had wrapped a wet cloth across his mouth. Lift on my count. Together they raised the cabinet. Elinor dragged Samuel free as burning plaster struck the floor behind them. Nathaniel carried the boy toward the door. Elinor followed, but stopped when something gleamed beneath the ruined desk. A silver leg band. She snatched it from the floor before the flames reached it. Outside, the estate physician examined Samuel while servants fought the fire. Elinor opened her palm. The band was stamped A14. Nathaniel frowned. What does it mean? Ashdown Loft, the Vale Estate. Corwin's attention fixed upon the band. Elinor continued. One of Lord Vale's pigeons was inside my signal room. That explains the false letter. A bird brought from Ashdown could be released at Blackmere and returned to Ashdown carrying a message. Or someone planted the band, Corwin said. Then that person understood the network better than the author of the letters. Nathaniel turned toward Samuel. Who entered the room? Samuel looked past him. The guard who had surrendered the key stood near the stretcher, one hand resting upon his sword. I saw no one, Samuel whispered. You told me a man in scarlet took the ledger, Elinor said. I was confused by the smoke. Elinor understood. Pressing him before Corwin's men would only endanger him further. Send him to the infirmary, she told Nathaniel. Place Dr. Mercer's own attendants at the door. Corwin stepped forward. My officers should question him first. No, Nathaniel said. For the first time that night, Corwin's confidence faltered. Nathaniel ordered the guard with the key confined for questioning. Then he faced Elinor. You will return to your rooms while I determine how an Ashdown band entered the signal room. You still intend to confine me. The fire does not erase the letters, and the letters do not explain the oil, the stolen ledger, or Thomas's warning. His voice dropped. The royal party arrives tomorrow. I will not accuse a respected family of treason before I possess proof. You had enough uncertainty to pause before condemning your wife. You simply chose not to. Nathaniel had no answer. Elinor allowed the footmen to escort her toward the house. At the terrace steps, 3 short flashes appeared in the western signal tower, followed by 2 long ones. A keeper's distress code. Elinor stopped. Against the light, a wounded man raised the signal lantern once more. Thomas Reed was alive. Then an arrow struck the window beside his head. "Thomas!" Elinor shouted. A second arrow shattered the lantern in the western tower. Nathaniel drew his pistol. "Search the courtyard in the woods. Reed is to be brought back alive." Corwin's officers ran toward the tower. Elinor watched them closely. Half entered the building, but none pursued the direction from which the arrows had come. "They are hunting Thomas, not the archer," she said. "They are following my order," Nathaniel replied. "They are following Corwin's men." His expression tightened. Before he could answer, the footmen closed around her. "Take her grace upstairs." Elinor did not resist. At the portrait gallery, she ordered one footman to fetch clean bandages and sent the other to warn Dr. Mercer that Samuel must not be left alone. Once both men had gone, she entered the old servant's stair behind the linen press. The narrow passage connected the family chambers to the western tower. She found Thomas 2 floors below, leaning against the wall with one hand pressed to his ribs. The arrow had torn through his coat and cut the flesh beneath it, but had not remained lodged. "You should be in your rooms," he whispered, "and you should have returned 3 days ago." "I tried." Elinor bound his wound as they descended toward an unused storeroom. Thomas explained that he had received written orders bearing Nathaniel's hunting seal. He was to take 6 Blackmere pigeons to the northern watchtower and exchange them for birds recently purchased from Ashdown. "I thought the transfer concerned the royal hunt," he said. "Then I examined the bands. They had been altered? Switched. Ashdown bands had been placed on 2 Blackmere birds, and Blackmere bands on 2 birds trained to return to Ashdown." Elinor understood the method. A conspirator could release an Ashdown bird at Blackmere, knowing it would carry a message directly back to the Vale estate. Later, the false Blackmere band would make the flight appear to belong to her network. "Who gave you the birds?" 2 men wearing Blackmere scarlet. Neither was one of our keepers." "Did you see Corwin?" "No, I will not accuse a man I did not see." That answer strengthened Elinor's trust in him. "What happened after you discovered the exchange?" "They locked me in the watchtower cellar and demanded the signal codes. I escaped this evening." Thomas reached inside his coat and withdrew a scorched piece of paper. "I returned for the ledger before they burned the signal room. The fragment recorded 4 pigeons transferred from Blackmere to Ashdown during the previous month. Each transfer bore Nathaniel's hunting seal. Beside 2 entries appeared Samuel Pike's initials. "Samuel helped them?" Elinor asked. "He signed the releases, but the handwriting changed after the first entry. I think someone forced him, or continued using his initials." Elinor studied the dates. The first transfer had occurred 6 weeks earlier, long before the supposed letters to Julian were discovered. The accusation against her had not been created in anger that evening. It had been prepared in advance. Why burn the ledger if these entries carried Nathaniel's authorization? Because the numbered bands would reveal which birds truly belonged to Ashdown. Boots sounded on the stair above them. Thomas reached for the small pistol beneath his coat. Elinor lowered his hand. "If you fire, Corwin will call it proof that we conspired against Nathaniel." The doorknob turned. "Elinor," Nathaniel called from the passage. "Open the door." She hesitated, then drew the bolt. Nathaniel entered alone. His gaze moved from Thomas's wound to the paper in Elinor's hand. "You disobeyed my order again." "Your order placed an injured witness in the path of men trying to kill him." Thomas laid his pistol on the floor and raised both hands. Nathaniel took the ledger fragment. He examined the transfer dates, Samuel's altered initials, and the impressions of his seal. "I did not authorize these exchanges." "Then someone used your seal," Elinor said. "It has remained locked in my study. Corwin entered my locked office with your permission. Who else have you allowed near yours?" For once, Nathaniel did not defend him. He held the paper closer to the lamp. "The first entry appears older than the rest." "Because it is genuine," Thomas said. "The other 3 were added later to resemble it." Nathaniel folded the fragment carefully instead of destroying it. "Thomas will remain under my personal guard. No officer appointed by Corwin is to approach him." A bell rang somewhere below. Then came hurried footsteps. Dr. Mercer appeared at the end of the passage, blood running from a wound above his ear. "Your Grace," he gasped, "Samuel has been taken from the infirmary." Elinor looked toward Nathaniel. The men he had given Corwin authority to command were no longer merely destroying evidence. They were removing witnesses. Nathaniel ordered the estate gates closed and every carriage searched. Corwin appeared in the passage moments later, already dressed for pursuit. "Give me 6 men," he said. "I will recover the boy." "No," Nathaniel replied. "You no longer command the search." Corwin's expression changed. "On what grounds?" "Someone wearing my hunting colors entered the infirmary. Until I know which men are loyal to me, none of your officers will act without my direct order." It was not an accusation, but it was the first authority Nathaniel had taken back from him. Corwin bowed stiffly. "As you wish." After he left, Elinor examined the fragment Thomas had saved. 4 transfer entries bore impressions of Nathaniel's hunting seal. She stopped at the second. "When was your seal damaged?" Nathaniel looked at the faint break along the stag's antler. 3 weeks ago. I dropped it against the hearth." "This transfer is dated 4 weeks ago, yet the impression includes the damage." Thomas leaned closer. "Then it was sealed later. Someone added the entry after the seal was chipped and gave it an earlier date," Elinor said. Nathaniel stared at the mark. "The seal remained in my study. Who had access?" "My secretary, 2 senior officers." His voice hardened. "And Corwin. Whenever we prepared the hunt," Elinor met his eyes. "You gave him access to my office, your guards and your seal. He did not seize power from you. You placed it in his hands." Nathaniel absorbed the accusation without turning away. "We still cannot prove he used it." "No, but we can prove these records were falsified." Nathaniel handed the fragment back to Thomas. "Keep it on your person. 2 men from my household staff will remain with you, men who served here before Corwin arrived." Thomas bowed. Nathaniel then faced Elinor. "You are no longer confined. Am I cleared? The letters still require examination. Then you have released me because you need my knowledge, not because you regret what you did." A flicker of shame crossed his face. "Yes." The honesty surprised her, but it repaired nothing. A flutter of wings sounded above the courtyard. One of the surviving Blackmere pigeons descended to the damaged loft. A keeper caught it and brought the message tube inside. The bird's feet were coated with pale yellow clay. Elinor opened the tube. Inside was a note in Samuel's handwriting. "Her Grace did not send the letters. I placed them beneath the floor. They threatened my sister." Below it, in another hand, someone had written, "Bring the ledger fragment and the Duke's hunting seal to the old limestone quarry before noon, or neither child returns." Nathaniel read the demand. "They expect us to obey." "No," Elinor said, rubbing the dry clay between her fingers. "They expect us to search the quarry." He looked at her. "The old quarry has gray stone and dark soil. This clay came from the abandoned signal station east of Ashdown. The pigeon had not told them where it had been sent. It had carried the ground beneath its cage back with it." Nathaniel carried Samuel's note into his study and locked the hunting seal inside the wall safe. "The royal hunt must be postponed," Elinor said. "If I send an armed warning without naming the threat, the royal household may cancel the visit entirely. A boy has been abducted. My records were burned, your seal was forged, and someone changed the approved route. What further proof do you require before inconvenience becomes preferable to bloodshed?" Nathaniel looked toward the royal itinerary upon his desk. Hosting the hunt was meant to restore his place among the king's advisors. A cancellation would expose disorder within his household and possibly end that ambition. Elinor saw him measuring lives against reputation. At last, he summoned Mr. Alden, the steward who had served Blackmere for 30 years. "You will ride to the royal advance party," Nathaniel ordered. "Deliver this warning directly to Lord Grenville. The hunt is suspended until I can guarantee the route." Elinor watched him seal the message with his ducal signet rather than the compromised hunting seal. It was the correct decision, but it had come only after every lesser choice had failed. "And Corwin?" she asked. "He will remain in the east guest room under guard." "Men he selected?" No. Alden's staff. Nathaniel turned toward her. I want you to reopen whatever remains of the communication network. Hours earlier, he had forbidden her to touch it. Before the guests? Elinor asked. His silence answered her. You are willing to use my authority privately, she said, but not restore my name publicly. I cannot retract an accusation until I know the entire truth. You did not require the entire truth to make it. Nathaniel flinched. Elinor took the written authority he offered, but not the Blackmere signet. Keep your seal. Your order will be witnessed by the keepers you dismissed. By dawn, 4 experienced keepers had gathered in an unused stable beyond the kitchen garden. Thomas remained under Dr. Mercer's care, but he marked the abandoned Ashdown signal station on a map. It stands above the yellow limestone cut, he explained. 2 roads leave it. One runs toward the old quarry. The other joins the Royal Road near Blackmere Bridge. Elinor divided the men into 2 groups. One would approach the quarry openly, with an empty document case, allowing the kidnappers to believe the demand had been obeyed. The other would accompany Elinor and Nathaniel to the abandoned station. Before leaving, Elinor sent a rider to the county magistrate with copies of Samuel's note and the falsified transfer entry. If they failed to return by noon, the magistrate was to enter Ashdown with constables. Nathaniel studied her preparations. You arranged all this without my seal. I told you I no longer needed it to make people trust me. They reached the Ashdown boundary shortly after 10. Beyond a screen of bare trees stood a disused stone tower and a low training barn. Pale clay covered the yard. 2 armed men guarded the entrance. Through a broken upper window, Elinor saw a girl tied to a chair. She recognized Samuel's 12-year-old sister, Mary. Samuel was nowhere in sight. Nathaniel reached for his pistol. Wait, Elinor whispered. If they intended to exchange both children, they would keep them together. A pigeon rose from behind the tower. Elinor recognized its false Blackmere band as it passed overhead, but the bird turned east, toward Ashdown Hall. They are sending a report, she said. Someone at Ashdown is directing them. A carriage emerged from the barn. Samuel was inside, his bruised face visible through the narrow window. 2 armed riders accompanied it toward the road leading to Blackmere Bridge. Elinor moved to follow, but Nathaniel pointed toward the tower. We cannot abandon the girl. Nor can we lose Samuel. He knows who forced him to place the letters. Nathaniel removed his pistol and handed it to his oldest groom. Take 2 men and free Mary. Elinor and I will follow the carriage. It was the first time that morning he had accepted her judgment without challenging it. They mounted and descended through the trees. As the carriage turned onto the forest road, Elinor saw its driver clearly. Captain Julian Harrow. The man named in the forged letters looked directly toward her hiding place. Then he raised a pistol and aimed at Nathaniel. Julian fired. The shot passed Nathaniel's shoulder and struck a man concealed among the trees behind him. The stranger fell, dropping a cocked pistol into the leaves. He was following you, Julian shouted. Move! He whipped the horses forward. Nathaniel stared at the fallen man, then mounted beside Elinor. They pursued the carriage along the forest road. 1 armed rider turned and fired. Nathaniel answered, forcing him away from the carriage. The second rider fled when he realized the others had fallen behind. Julian slowed beneath an overhanging branch. Elinor drew alongside the carriage, opened the door, and found Samuel bound inside. She cut the rope around his wrists. Mary? He gasped. Our men are freeing her. Julian stopped in a clearing and descended with his pistol lowered. Nathaniel placed himself between him and Elinor. You were named in letters arranging an attack on the royal party. I wrote none of them. Julian removed a folded commission from inside his coat. It bore the seal of the Home Office and authorized him to investigate stolen military ammunition being sold through private estates. For 2 months, I have worked inside Lord Vale's household, he said. Ashdown has received powder and shot purchased under false hunting orders. Several orders bear your name. Nathaniel's expression darkened. I never approved military ammunition. You signed accounts Corwin placed among legitimate hunt expenses. Nathaniel did not deny it. Why did you not warn me? Elinor asked. I tried. 1 genuine letter was sent to you through an Ashdown pigeon. Corwin intercepted it and used my name to create the others. Julian knew how the forgery had begun, but not who copied Eleanor's handwriting or how the false records had been constructed. Samuel supplied the missing piece. A clerk at Ashdown practiced from invitations Her Grace sent Lord Vale, he said. They made me hide the letters. They said Mary would disappear if I refused. Elinor looked at Julian, and the altered birds allowed Ashdown to receive messages bearing Blackmere bands. Yes. Nathaniel's face had gone pale. The conspiracy had succeeded not because Corwin possessed extraordinary power, but because Nathaniel had given him access to the seal, the accounts, and Eleanor's network. "What is the ammunition for?" Elinor asked. "I do not know the complete plan," Julian admitted. "I only know several marked cartridges were moved last night toward Blackmere Bridge." Samuel shook his head. "They mean to shoot Lord Grenville." Everyone turned toward him. "He is carrying an order to inspect the military stores at Ashdown." Corwin said, "Grenville must die before he reaches Blackmere." Nathaniel looked toward the road. "I sent Alden to warn him." "They knew," Samuel said. "A rider left the station to stop your steward." A cannon sounded across the valley, the signal announcing that the royal advance party had entered Blackmere land. Lord Grenville was already approaching the bridge. "The bridge is 4 miles away," Nathaniel said. "3 by the keeper's path," Elinor replied. Julian remained with Samuel while Elinor and Nathaniel rode through the forest. The narrow trail climbed toward the eastern signal post overlooking Blackmere Bridge. Below them, Lord Grenville's carriage approached with 6 mounted escorts. Across the river, 3 men waited behind the abandoned toll house. Their rifles rested upon the stone wall, aimed at the center of the bridge. "We cannot reach them before the carriage does," Nathaniel said. "We do not need to." Elinor dismounted at the signal post. The warning flags had been removed when Corwin took control, but the old storm bell remained. She pulled the rope 3 times, paused, then rang twice more. The bridge keeper looked up from the toll gate. Elinor removed her red cloak and raised it between 2 poles, the signal used when floodwater made the bridge unsafe. The keeper understood. He lowered the heavy timber barrier across the road. Lord Grenville's driver reined in the horses 20 yards before the bridge. The gunmen had lost their clear shot. One fired too early. The ball struck the carriage door but did not penetrate it. Grenville's escorts drew their weapons and spread around the carriage. Nathaniel rode toward the toll house while Elinor continued ringing the alarm. Farmhands and bridge workers emerged from nearby cottages, forcing the gunmen to defend 2 directions. One surrendered. Another fled into the reeds. The third stepped from behind the toll house. Corwin Vale. He had discarded his scarlet coat, but Elinor recognized him immediately. Nathaniel raised his pistol. "You were confined at Blackmere. Your servants are more loyal to Silver than to you," Corwin replied. He aimed at Elinor. Nathaniel drove his horse between them as Corwin fired. The ball struck Nathaniel high in the shoulder and threw him from the saddle. Elinor ran to him. "Do not let him reach the woods," Nathaniel gasped. Corwin mounted a horse hidden behind the toll house. Julian appeared on the opposite road and fired, but Corwin bent low over the saddle and escaped through the trees. He dropped a leather pouch as he fled. Grenville's guards pursued him, while Elinor pressed a folded cloth against Nathaniel's wound. The ball had passed through the flesh without striking bone, but blood soaked his sleeve. Lord Grenville approached from the carriage. "Who arranged this attack?" Nathaniel looked toward Elinor. The night before, he had condemned her before an entire hall. Now he answered before the official whose life she had saved. "My former master of the hunt," he said. "But Corwin succeeded because I gave him access to my seal, my accounts, and my wife's communication system." Grenville's gaze moved to Elinor. "Did Her Grace warn you?" "Repeatedly." "And you ignored her?" Nathaniel's face tightened with pain, but he did not evade the truth. "Yes." Elinor heard the admission without mistaking it for repair. Julian retrieved the pouch Corwin had dropped. Inside were 2 cartridges marked with Blackmere Stag and a brass key. Nathaniel recognized it, the armory key. Elinor examined the cartridge paper. Beneath Blackmere's mark was a faint government cipher used to identify military stores. Corwin could steal your seal, she said, but he could not authorize ammunition from a government depot. Grenville studied the cipher. He had help from someone inside my department. A folded paper lay beneath the cartridges. It contained instructions for the ambush, but the final line had been torn away, leaving only half a signature. The conspiracy extended beyond Ashdown, and the person who had supplied the ammunition still held office near the Crown. Lord Grenville established a temporary inquiry in Blackmere's library. Nathaniel lay in an adjoining room while the royal physician treated his shoulder. Samuel and Mary were reunited under guard. One captured gunman had agreed to identify the men who paid him, but he knew Corwin only by name and had never met the government official who supplied the ammunition. The evidence proved an ambush had occurred. It did not yet prove who had designed the entire conspiracy, or fully clear Elinor of the forged correspondence. Julian placed the surviving letters upon the library table. Nathaniel had burned only the first. 5 remained. Elinor examined them properly for the first time. The handwriting resembled hers, but the pressure was uneven. The copyist had reproduced the shape of her letters without understanding the rhythm of her hand. Worse, one message mentioned a pigeon identified as B-27. Thomas checked the scorched ledger fragment. B-27 is a Blackmere bird, he said. That alone supports the accusation, Grenville replied. No, Elinor said. It gives us a date to test. She held one letter toward the window. The watermark was not the bell beneath a crown used by her York stationer. Instead, the paper bore a small oak leaf above the letter W. Julian recognized it. Government stationery. A private batch issued to 3 offices responsible for military supply. Grenville examined the watermark. My department uses the same paper. Then Corwin's accomplice did not merely provide ammunition, Elinor said. He supplied the paper used to accuse me. Nathaniel entered before the physician could stop him. His arm rested in a sling, and pain had drained the color from his face. Elinor handed him the letter. Now you may hold it toward the light. He saw the watermark. For several seconds he said nothing. You were right, he admitted. I was right when it still mattered. Nathaniel's fingers tightened around the page. I should have examined the first letter. You should have examined all of them before condemning me. Grenville looked between them but did not interrupt. Nathaniel placed the letter carefully on the table. What else do you need? Proof of where B-27 was on the dates written here. The return ledger burned. The principal ledger burned, Elinor corrected, but I never kept only one record. She explained that every village using the network contributed grain, feed, or small payments toward the pigeon's care. Because those contributions came through her private allowance, each flight was also recorded in the village relief accounts. The duplicate books were stored at the Lower Y schoolhouse, beyond Blackmere and outside Corwin's control. Nathaniel looked at her. Why did I not know? You never asked how the system was financed. You praised it when it reflected well upon you and ignored it when the work became inconvenient. He accepted the rebuke without defense. Grenville ordered 2 trusted guards to accompany Elinor, Thomas, and Julian to Lower Y. Nathaniel moved to join them. You have been shot, Elinor said. I can still ride. This is not another opportunity to place yourself between a pistol and the consequences of your own choices. Pain, not from the wound, crossed his face. What would you have me do? Remain here. Examine every order you signed. Determine how much ammunition passed through Blackmere, while you were too ambitious to read the accounts placed before you. Nathaniel lowered his gaze. This time he obeyed. The schoolhouse stood above the river on land settled upon Elinor at marriage. Its widowed schoolmistress, Mrs. Ames, led them to a locked cabinet containing 9 years of relief accounts. Thomas found the entry within minutes. October 14th. Bird B-27 arrived from North Mill at 8 minutes past 10. Medicine delivered to the Fletcher household. Witnessed by Mrs. Ames, Dr. Mercer, and John Pike. The forged letter claimed Elinor had released the same bird from Blackmere at 10 that night to carry a message to Julian. A pigeon could not return to 2 different home lofts. More importantly, B-27 had remained at Lower Y until morning, because heavy rain made its return journey unsafe. 3 witnesses and the physician's medicine ledger confirmed it. They checked the remaining dates. Each accusation failed. On one night, B-27 had been at Lower Y. On another, the gray hen mentioned in the letter had not yet been transferred to Blackmere. A third bird had died 2 months before the date on which it supposedly carried Elinor's message. The letters were not merely suspicious, they were physically impossible. Thomas turned another page. Your Grace, there is more. 4 bags of pigeon feed had been purchased from an Ashdown supplier during the previous month. Payment had been claimed under Elinor's private allowance, yet the receipt bore Nathaniel's hunting seal. Elinor examined the signature authorizing collection. It belonged to Samuel, or attempted to. The copyist repeated the same mistake, she said. Samuel closes the upper curve of his P. This one remains open. Julian studied the supplier's name. This merchant also appears in the military investigation. His carts carried ammunition beneath sacks of grain. The network used to forge Elinor's letters had also concealed the movement of weapons. A guard entered from outside. We found a man watching the schoolhouse. He fled before we reached him, but he left this. The guard placed a torn strip of cloth on the table. Blackmere scarlet. Corwin knew the duplicate records had survived. Julian moved toward the door. We must take the books to Grenville immediately. No, Elinor said. Everyone turned toward her. If we move them openly, Corwin will attack the carriage. If we hide them, he will disappear until his accomplice destroys the remaining government records. What do you propose? Thomas asked. Elinor closed the relief ledger. We let him believe the books will be brought to Blackmere tonight, and when he comes for them, we follow him to the person who needs them destroyed. Julian studied her for a moment, then nodded. They prepared 2 identical document chests. The real accounts remained concealed beneath the schoolroom floor. The second chest was filled with blank exercise books and sealed with Elinor's private mark. A writer departed openly for Blackmere carrying false instructions that the evidence would be presented to Grenville before midnight. At dusk, Elinor watched from the schoolhouse loft as a dark carriage appeared beyond the river. It did not approach the front entrance. It stopped beneath the trees, where Corwin waited beside a man in a government coat. The stranger handed him the missing half of the ambush order. When the 2 torn pieces met, the signature would be complete. Elinor recognized the man beside Corwin. Sir Malcolm Wren served as Deputy Director of Military Procurement. He had dined at Blackmere twice, and had congratulated Nathaniel on securing the royal hunt. More importantly, he controlled the stationery bearing the oak leaf watermark. From the schoolhouse loft, Elinor watched Wren hand Corwin the torn paper. You should have destroyed your half after the bridge, Wren said. And trusted you to deny everything? Corwin replied. This order proves you selected Grenville as the target. It also proves your father received the ammunition. Neither man knew that Julian and 4 county constables were concealed inside the adjoining classroom. Lord Grenville waited with the magistrate in the vestry across the churchyard. Elinor had insisted they allow the meeting to continue until both men handled the evidence. Corwin looked toward the schoolhouse. Where are the relief ledgers? In the document chest, Wren answered. The Duchess's carriage will collect it before midnight. We take the books first, burn them at Ashdown, and leave enough pages in her rooms to suggest she destroyed her own records. Elinor felt no surprise. The same method had been used from the beginning. Place evidence near her, let Nathaniel's pride supply the accusation, and destroy whatever might contradict it. Corwin and Wren entered through the rear door. Thomas waited in the darkened schoolroom beside the decoy chest. At Elinor's signal, he retreated through the servants' entrance, making enough noise to convince the intruders that a frightened guard had fled. Corwin forced the lock. Inside, he found blank exercise books. Wren's composure broke first. She knew. The schoolroom lamps were uncovered. Julian stepped from the adjoining doorway with his pistol drawn. So did Lord Grenville. Constables entered behind him. Corwin reached for his weapon, but Elinor emerged from the stairwell holding the first half of the ambush order. You will not escape through the rear door, she said. The magistrate's men are outside. Wren slipped his half of the order into his coat. Elinor raised the paper she held. One half names the place and time. The other bears the authorization. Together, they prove who ordered the attack." "It proves nothing," Wren replied. "Blackmere purchased those cartridges." The Duke's signatures appear on the requisitions. A rider entered carrying a sealed packet from Nathaniel. While Elinor had been at Lower Y, Nathaniel had examined every hunting account Corwin placed before him during the previous 6 months. Inside the packet were 12 payment summaries bearing Nathaniel's signature. He had also enclosed the unsigned supporting orders originally attached to them. The quantities did not match. After Nathaniel signed the totals, additional lines for military powder and cartridges had been inserted before the papers reached Wren's department. Beside each alteration appeared Wren's initials. Nathaniel had been negligent enough to sign incomplete summaries. Wren had exploited that negligence to authorize theft. Julian placed the altered papers beside the marked cartridges. The depot clerks can verify these issue numbers. Wren turned on Corwin. "Your father assured me Blackmere would bear the blame." Corwin's expression hardened. "And you assured him Grenville would never reach the bridge." The admission settled over the room. Wren realized too late what he had said. The magistrate entered with Lord Grenville. "I reached it," Grenville said, "because the woman you framed understood the warning system her husband allowed you to dismantle." Corwin drew a concealed pistol and fired toward the evidence table. The ball struck the wall above it. Julian forced his arm downward while 2 constables seized him. Wren made no attempt to resist when the magistrate removed the missing half of the order from his coat. Placed together, the torn document carried Wren's full signature and Corwin's handwritten acknowledgement. Both men were taken into custody. Before dawn, constables searched Ashdown Hall. They found Lord Vale attempting to burn a depot ledger in his study. The surviving pages recorded payments to the clerk who copied Elinor's handwriting, the merchant who transported ammunition beneath pigeon feed, and the guards who abducted Samuel and Mary. Lord Vale was arrested with the half-burned book still on his desk. At Blackmere, Grenville ordered the Great Hall prepared for a formal public hearing the following morning. The same guests who had watched Nathaniel condemn his wife would be required to hear the evidence clearing her. Elinor returned shortly before sunrise. Nathaniel awaited her in the empty hall, his injured arm bound tightly against his chest. The brazier in which he had burned the first letter still stood beside the dais. "Corwin, Wren, and Lord Vale have been arrested," Elinor told him. "And your name, not yet restored." Nathaniel looked toward the brazier. "I will withdraw the accusation before every person who heard it. That is the minimum required." "I know." He handed her a written statement. It did not ask for forgiveness. It listed every decision he had made, granting Corwin access, refusing to test the watermark, stripping Elinor of authority, confining her, and signing incomplete accounts. At the bottom, Nathaniel had written, "No forgery compelled me to humiliate my wife. I chose to do that myself." Elinor folded the statement. Tomorrow he would have to read it aloud, and after her name was restored, she would tell him what his choices had cost their marriage. The following morning, the great hall of Blackmere held the same guests who had watched Nathaniel burn the letter bearing Julian Harrow's name. The scorched brazier remained beside the dais. County constables guarded Corwin Vale, Lord Vale, and Sir Malcolm Wren, while Lord Grenville presided over the public hearing. Elinor entered alone. She stood at the evidence table with Thomas, Samuel, Julian, and the surviving keepers behind her. Elinor held one forged letter toward the window. "The paper bears the oak leaf watermark issued to Wren's department, not the mark of my private stationer." She then opened the Lower Y relief accounts. "This letter claims Pigeon B-27 carried my message to Captain Harrow on October 14th, but B-27 was at Lower Y that night, delivering medicine. Mrs. Ames, Dr. Mercer, and John Pike witnessed its arrival. The witnesses confirmed the entry. Thomas produced the falsified transfer record. Its seal bore damage that had not existed on the date written beside it, proving the entry had been added later. Samuel explained how Corwin's men held his sister and forced him to hide the letters beneath Elinor's office floor. Julian presented his home office commission, the stolen cartridges, and the altered supply orders. The chain was complete. Wren supplied government paper and ammunition. Lord Vale moved the weapons beneath sacks of pigeon feed. Corwin falsified the bird records, framed Elinor and planned Lord Grenville's murder before the inspection of Ashdown could expose them. Lord Grenville turned to Nathaniel. The Duke rose with his wounded arm in a sling. "No conspirator forced me to humiliate my wife," he said. The hall fell silent. Elinor identified the wrong knot, the impossible delivery instructions, and the need to examine the watermark. I refused every test because I feared appearing weak before my guests. He faced the same people before whom he had condemned her. I searched her rooms, burned evidence, stripped her of authority, and gave Corwin control of her network. When she warned me, I confined her. Corwin forged the letters, but my pride made his scheme possible. Nathaniel looked at Elinor. Captain Harrow was never her lover. Duchess Elinor committed no adultery, treason, or deception. She prevented Lord Grenville's murder after I repeatedly chose my reputation over her evidence. He placed his written confession beside the forged letters. My wife did not betray Blackmere. I betrayed her. Lord Grenville publicly cleared Elinor of every accusation. Copies of the declaration would be sent to the Crown, county magistrates, and every guest who had witnessed her humiliation. Corwin, Wren, and Lord Vale remained in custody pending trial for conspiracy, attempted murder, abduction, arson, forgery, and theft of military stores. Nathaniel was not charged as a conspirator, but he was not absolved. The Crown suspended his advisory position and authority over the county militia, while Blackmere's accounts underwent an independent audit. He accepted every order. After the hearing, Nathaniel presented Elinor with a proposed settlement. Hawthorne House and its income would be placed in trust for her independent use. Separate trustees would control the rebuilt communication network, preventing Nathaniel from dismissing its keepers or seizing its funds. Every dismissed servant would receive back pay. Samuel, Mary, and Thomas would receive compensation. Elinor would maintain her own household under formal articles of separation. "This does not repair what I did," Nathaniel said. "No, and it is not offered in exchange for forgiveness." "Good," Elinor replied. "Because forgiveness is not for sale." Her solicitor examined the settlement before she signed it. Elinor moved to Hawthorne House before winter. Nathaniel remained at Blackmere and wrote to her each month. She returned the letters containing apologies. She kept only those reporting compensation paid, accounts corrected, and promises completed. 1 year later, the rebuilt signal station opened beside Hawthorne House. Nathaniel arrived alone and remained outside its gate. He handed Elinor the original proclamation forbidding her from using the messenger network. Beneath it, he had written a complete retraction signed by every guest present at her humiliation. "I will not return to Blackmere," Elinor said. "I understand, and I will not promise you forgiveness." "I understand that too." She studied him for a long moment. "You may visit next month," she said. "For 1 hour, if I still wish it then." A gray pigeon descended toward the hawthorn loft, carrying a message from Lower Y. Nathaniel made no attempt to take it. Elinor received the bird and opened the message herself. Only after she had read it did she decide whether to open the gate.